Here's an article here about the latest scandal from the IPCC. It's the United Nations. And remember, everything at the United Nations, I don't care what department, they have a political agenda. You should read your history on it. And this one is from the Telegraph by Christopher Booker. It says, African crops yield another catastrophe for the IPCC. One more alarming claim in the IPCC's 2007 report is disintegrating under closer examination, says Christopher Booker. That's the 13th of February, 2010. It says, even more question marks have been raised in recent weeks over the reputations of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and of its chairman, Dr. Rajendra Pachauri. But the latest example to emerge is arguably the most bizarre and scandalous of all. It centers on a very specific scare story which was included in the IPCC's 2007 report, although it was completely at odds with the scientific evidence, like everything else that they do, including that produced by the British expert in charge of the relevant section of the report. Even more tellingly, however, this particular claim has repeatedly been championed by Dr. Pachauri himself. Only last week, Pachauri was specifically denying the appearance of this claim in 2 IPCC reports, including one of which he was the editor, was an error. Yet it has now come to light that the IPCC, ignoring the evidence of its own experts, deliberately published the claim for propaganda purposes. That means political purposes, folks. And it says, one of the most widely quoted and the most alarmist pages in this report was a warning that by 2020, global warming could reduce crop yields in some countries in Africa by 50%. Pachauri not only allowed this claim to be included in the short synthesis report, of which he was co-editor, but has publicly repeated it many times since. The origin of this claim was a report written for a Canadian advocacy group, that's political greening group, by Ali Agoumi, a Moroccan academic who listened to this, who draws part of his current income from advising on how to make application for carbon credits. He's an opportunist. You understand what an opportunist is? As his primary sources, he cited reports for 3 North African governments, but none of these remotely supported what he wrote. The nearest any got to providing evidence for his claim was one for the Moroccan government, which said that in serious drought years, cereal yields might be reduced by 50%. The report from the Algerian government, on the other hand, predicted that on current projections, agricultural production will be more than double by 2020. Yet it was Agoumi's claim that the climate change could cut yields by 50% that was headed by the IPCC's Working Group 2 report in 2007. Back with more after this break.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Hi folks, this is Alan Watts and we're cutting through the matrix, reading an article about the cons and the deception and the political agenda within the IPCC, where they're still prattling on about false reports and claiming that they're true, even though it's been admitted elsewhere that they're packs of lies, basically. And he was on about this particular report from the Telegraph. It says here that what made this even odder, however, was that the group's co-chairman was a British agricultural expert, Dr. Martin Parry, whose consultancy group Martin Parry Associates have been paid, or Parry Associates have been paid £75,000 by the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which is called DEFRA, for 2 reports which had come to totally different conclusions. Specifically designed to inform the IPCC's 2007 report, these predicted that by 2020, any changes were likely to be insignificant. That was the report that Pachauri was handed. And yet he lied and went the opposite way with it. It says the worst case they could come up with was about 2080, climate change might decrease crop yields by up to 30%. That's like if some oddball thing happened that wasn't predicted. British taxpayers poured out money for the section of IPCC report for which Dr. Parry was responsible, DEFRA paid £2.5 million through the Met Office, plus £330,000 for Dr. Parry's salary as a co-chairman and a further £75,000 to his consultancy for 2 more reports on the impact of global warming on world food supplies. Yet when it came to the impact on Africa, all this peer-reviewed work, including further expert reports by Britain's Dr. Mike Hume and Dutch and German teams, was ignored in favour of a prediction from one Moroccan activist at odds with his own cited resources. In other words, a guy who lied through his teeth that I read at the beginning of this particular article. Fraud, 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 fraud. And I'm just wondering, you see, if the myth-making machine that created the IPCC and the UN, you see, these holy men at the top, these guys who literally are all out, they sacrifice their lives to help the world, you know. I wonder if that myth will overcome this data here. We'll find out, won't we?